right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Kara. My name is Matt Hartwell with BZ Build Co. I'm the head of experience here, customer relations, and we've put together this series, Rebuild Roadmap, to talk about all the different things that everyone's going to encounter. And I know everyone's situation obviously is going to be different, individualized to them, but kind of, just we're trying to go over everything that people are going to run into throughout this whole process. And so tonight we're going to be talking about those steps leading up to construction. We're calling it, the road to construction. And I have three fantastic speakers lined up for tonight. We have a few more attendees joining us, but I don't want to keep you waiting, so we'll go ahead and get started. We've got David Donahue and Jonathan Gallagher, who are our two build specialists, and Josh Pullen, who's our design coordinator. And welcome, Leslie. I was just introducing everyone. Again, our two build specialists, Jonathan and David. Our design coordinator, Josh, are going to be speaking with everyone tonight. And they've got a presentation to share with you. And I will go ahead and pull that up now. And David, if you want to introduce yourself. Gentlemen, I guess if you all want to introduce yourselves, and then let me know, I'll get the presentation pulled up on screen.
Thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate it. Glad everybody's here to join us on our first live webinar talking about rebuilding roadmap, the rebuilding roadmap for Altadena. And this is going to be designed specifically for homeowners and just the processes that they're going to be, going through and rebuilding. So anyway, my name is David Donahue. I am a build specialist with the BZ Build Co. And I've been doing construction and housing for over 25 years. And I am really excited to be here for this presentation. And then I'd also like to ask Jonathan if he'd introduce himself.
Yes, my name is Jonathan. I'm a build specialist with BZ Build Co. With over 10 years of development experience with all facets from multifamily, residential, and industrial real estate. And I'm here to really help and guide individuals through the process of development and really, going through all the different challenges and navigating that process. So we're excited to put together this webinar series to really introduce you to all the different avenues of construction, different challenges you may face, and really, provide guidance and value as you go through this experience and this journey together.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Josh, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. My name is Josh Pullen, and I'm the design coordinator for BZ Build Co. Um, my job is to be the first person you contact as soon as you sign the contract, and we get started with the design process. We meet at your site, we talk about your plans, your hopes, your dreams, what you want to make with your house. And then I take that information, get it to the architects, the design team, and they get to work. And then our relationship goes all the way to construction starts.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Jonathan. So everybody, we're going to get started here with the slide presentation. This is something that is designed to be informative. Even though we're with a company, we really want these resources to be used, universally. So if you're talking to an architect or a designer, or you're talking to another general contractor, this should really be of value to you. So what I'm going to ask is so Matt is going to be working behind the scenes here. If you could launch the presentation, and then Jonathan is going to take us through site conditions.
Sounds good. I am launching it now.
Whenever you're ready, I'll just leave it there.
All right, Jonathan, if you'd like to kind of take us into as soon as we get to the next slide.
Sweet. Thank you, David. So the first slide that we're going to talk about today is site conditions. The most important step really in the beginning of rebuilding and or building development of new construction real estate. So one of the things that we're going to talk about on tonight's presentation is the actual lot conditions. Speaking a little bit about debris removal, what has been done to the site already from the Army Corps of Engineers, understanding the site boundaries and guidelines, what your allowances are per the county and what they will and will not allow. And really also is understanding any kind of delays that could be associated with your site with regard to the condition of it, be it debris that's still there and or any other outstanding site conditions with regard to safety.
And I think that's a really good point. And you can see in this slide, Jonathan, where you have a lot that looks like it's pretty much been cleared, and then one to the right that doesn't even look like it's been touched.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that obviously we've encountered, coming out of the Eaton fire is the Army Corps of Engineers are going to individual sites and they're clearing them. But they tend to actually leave a lot of the existing site work, on the property. And so when we're talking about rebuilding, we'll dive a little bit deeper in the presentation, but you're going to have issues of hardscape. You may have trees. You may have additional debris that's going to be it's going to be required to be removed prior to you actually getting out there and starting construction.
Great. And Matt, if you could advance to the next slide, please, sir. So this is something, and Jonathan, could you tell us what we're looking at here, please?
So what we're looking at here is a completely cleared lot site here by the Army Corps of Engineers that's been authorized, as well as a covering over it for to protect for the dust. Now, one of the things I really want to emphasize with the cleared lot, as such here, is this is your land and this is your property that you own. And what's really important here is security and safety. And as being as a landowner, you assume liability for things that could occur on your property. And so, given the fact that Altadena is going through this large transformation now, post cleanup of all the fire debris, is we really want to educate and make sure that people are taking the precautionary steps to really secure their site. And so looking into potentially installing a security fence, any other security mechanisms to really prevent theft, but also prevent people from trespassing onto your property.
Excellent. And Matt, next slide, please. So this is something I want to kind of talk about is site readiness. So site readiness is a kind of a term that Jonathan and I kind of worked on. We were trying to talk to people in various, we've been to some community events. So site readiness is after the Army Corps has been to the property, and they've taken out the foundations typically for the main home, and if there is a garage or an outbuilding, they've taken those out. But they are going to leave some things. So one of the things you're going to see here is that you have a driveway and some patios. That is going to be something that is not cleared yet. That will have to be cleared be cleared in the future before the construction can start. Also, some of the people that we're talking to have hired private contractors. Now, those are people that come in, they may not have the same systems as the Army Corps does. So what we're seeing sometimes is if they have not done all of the site, preparation, they haven't put the fence around the swimming pool, which is really, really important. You may want to look at, kind of holding back to send that last payment before they do complete it. And they've given everything to the LA County that's required for this first phase of the preparation of your site. Next slide, please, Matt. So one of the things for getting the property ready is you have to have that secondary clearing, which is what Jonathan was talking about. You have to go in there and clear off some of those concrete slabs. This is also a slide that I think it really kind of sheds some light on something a little bit differently, is the trees. Because if you can see all of the three dots that are on the trees all over the place, and those are marked for removal. Here we see the stumps of some Italian cypress, and there was a very, big mature row of them, and that they've all been removed. The stumps are remaining, and that is going to be something is going to be important to address on the second phase of site, preparation, because these are going to need to be either, taken down below grade or possibly removed so that they don't create some issues in the future. Also, what Jonathan said is fencing. You want to protect your property and make sure that if you do have a pool or a spa or something, somebody's not going to fall into it or some animals are not going to fall into it. So that's something to keep in your mind. Also, getting ready, you want to have your septic systems, if you are on septic, have it inspected. The county will do that for you. It costs about $1,400 or so and takes about 3 or 4 weeks to be able to have them come out and inspect it, but you can do that. Next slide, please. But this is something that I really brings it home on getting your site ready. Here is a piece of property that has multiple levels. It has the one level, then this happens to be me, and I'm flying a drone. And because I wanted to get a better look at what these retaining walls were looking, what the condition was. You can see that bottom or lower retaining wall actually looks like it's started to be demolished, and it was. It's kind of hard to see in the very top right-hand corner of the image, but there is a tractor that was there that the private contractor tried to remove some of those stones of the retaining wall. So now this is going to be it does create an issue that you really want to look at very closely to see what is going to be required for code. This also is something that needs to be surveyed. So this, because of the multiple levels, it's going to need a topographical survey as opposed to just the 4 points that a flat lot typically requires. Next slide. This is also something that we're seeing a lot. You have these wonderful oak trees, but they are right up against a retaining wall, and it's something that could be put, that the oak tree itself could be pushing over that retaining wall. That is on the neighbor's property. The other side, closest to us, is where the retaining wall is starting to fall back a little bit. And this oak tree has been marked for removal. So the property owner is having to look at having that removed just to avoid some future potential issues. Next slide. Now, this is something that Jonathan and I both want to kind of share some thoughts on. This is a sort of a site preview. Now, Josh, am I saying that what this is, what we're looking at? Because this is something that you went and got, right?
Yeah, this is a site plan. It's your existing site plan. It's unofficial, but it looks like a survey. So those are the lines. As you can see, the black dotted dashed lines are your property line. And, what strikes me immediately is seeing that line goes right through a part of the house.
So what that indicates is that the existing house, according to this site plan, was over the property line, right?
Yes.
I think
Yep.
that's kind of amazing that that could have happened. We're not sure. So this is not an official, like Josh said. So we've asked for is both a survey to identify the corners as well as a topographical to the multi-level so that we can kind of get a really good sense of this. And I know that Jonathan, you wanted to jump in on, add your thoughts too.
Yeah, so I mean, both of you really kind of gave an explanation of this particular situation, which is a client of ours and an issue that we're navigating in-house. But if you really look finally, you can see on the top, they have a 2-foot setback on the existing line on the top property line. Now that doesn't meet the current code, what would pass for acceptable for a like for like. In this particular situation, the existing structure, it was encroaching on their neighbor's property. So, when David and I are really speaking about site conditions and understanding of your property and the process to rebuilding and really going through that design phase, which we're going to talk about next, is understanding property lines, boundary surveys, and things that are required through the development process that really help you dial in to what you can build, what you can and what you can't, and really trying to maximize the value in that process. But for this particular situation right here is something that it's important to consult with professionals that have a really good eye as far as what the county is going to require for replacement of this existing structure.
You touched on something, Jonathan, I think is important to kind of dive into just a little bit deeper, and that's like for like and existing property lines. You very correctly pointed out that at the very top of this slide, where the top left of the home is only 2 feet away from a property line. So if it is like for like, what does that allow you to do if you are within a 4 or 5 foot setback?
Is that
I can
question at
answer
me or
that.
is that at Josh?
I can answer that.
Sure.
So like for like is a big design question. It's a term that's out there. A lot of people think that if you do like for like, it's easier, and in some ways it can be. But one of the things it does, and this applies to this issue right here, is you can keep your existing property lines. So right now, Altadena has 5-foot setbacks on most properties on the side. And if you didn't do a like for like, if you decided you wanted to do a 2-story house or a bigger house here, you would have to meet those 5-foot setbacks on either side. And as you can see, that can be problematic in this instance where there's already a concern that the house goes over the property line on one side and is only 2 feet on the other.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Josh. And so one of the things I think is important also to kind of call out is that in this particular situation, the neighbors are very friendly and they like each other. So that there could be a lot line adjustment that could be, you could submit to LA County to adjust that property line that you see at the bottom that kind of goes through a section of the home to come down to allow for the home to be rebuilt in the same footprint that it was in. It just takes about 3 to 4 months to do a lot line adjustment. There's a little bit of process to go through, but it can be done. Before we move on to the next slide, any other comments, Jonathan?
No, I think we got everything.
Great. Next slide, Matt. All right, design phase and insurance coverage. Jonathan, would you like to dive in
Yeah,
on that?
sweet. I'll go right into insurance. So, insurance coverage, there's several different line items that is part of your policy that you're covered for. And you got the dwelling A, which was the existing like for like, which we'll talk about later in this presentation. Josh can kind of shed some light on that. And then obviously your personal property. We're also going to talk about additional coverage items that you may or may not be aware of, such as a building and ordinance and law, trees and shrubs, and some other different line items that I'll jump into. But when we talk about like for like, and really what the insurance is the insurance company is asking for is they want to see a cost estimate for what it would cost to rebuild your home, and they're looking for an itemized estimate. Preferably in their standards using the Xactimate software, which breaks it down to the line items that they use as to what it would cost to build a like for like. And in this situation here is the county is allowing you to build either 10% more or 200 square feet, whichever is greater.
Great. And I know that this is something we're going to, I hope that we touch on is bulk and mass. So who wants to talk about that?
I can talk about that. This is an interesting part of the like for like discussion is that it says 10% or 200 square feet. And so people often think immediately, well, I'm just going to add on 200 square feet and have a new master bedroom. And under certain conditions that can be met. But as David is talking about bulk and mass, if you want to, for instance, raise your roof 2 feet and have 10-foot ceilings, that 2 feet across your house is considered additional square footage. Now, there are workarounds for things like that. If you had crawl space underneath your house and you go to a slab foundation, you can keep that bulk and mass in a similar location. Some people don't need the 200 square feet. Maybe they just want to bump out a room or they want some extra storage, and it's not that much of an issue. But let's say you're going to add a second story, you're definitely not going to be doing a like for like.
And
I think it
something
was a great
else,
explanation.
I wanted to add one more thing here. As far as the new and the redesigns here on the bottom of the slide is, we have a lot of clients and have fielded a lot of questions about ADUs. What is an ADU? I want an ADU. How do I get one? So an ADU is a completely separate addition to your property. It can be an attached structure. It could be a detached structure. It will require a completely different set of plans. And in terms of dealing with your insurance, if you submit to them that you are building an ADU, they might give you pushback saying, well, that's not a like for like, you're building something that's extremely different. So there's different ways that you can kind of formulate providing them a like for the existing structure and then having a separate, contractual bid and proposal for the ADU. But I think and we may talk about it later in this presentation or in our future webinar series, but doing garage conversions to ADUs, having ADUs built on top of what was former garages and really the different setbacks and design standards there.
I think that's a great point. I think we're definitely going to be covering that in the future, and thank you for that. So the one I want to add with the new or redesigning with your property, you're limited if you're not going to do your 10% or your 200 square feet, and you're taking into consideration you're not going to balance out bulk and mass. You're really only limited by your imagination, your budget, and what your property is going to allow. We have a lot of people that we're talking to that are definitely going well beyond what they had before. And they're just, kind of going that route. And I think that that's great. So just the LA County is allowing a lot of the fire survivors front of line when it comes to permitting. So like for like is going to have probably about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, maybe about a month's advantage but then all of the fire survivors are still pretty much in the very front of the permitting process.
It's really it really is a week or two for the like for like. It's not. I don't think it's. I don't think the reason for doing a like for like is necessarily that you're going to get permitted faster, although that is possible and that is a reason to do it. I think the most common reason for doing a like for like is one, you liked your house the way it was and you want the same thing back. But number two would be to keep your existing setbacks, so you don't have to conform to all the rules of new construction.
And one other thing I wanted to chime in on for the like for like is that they had really the advantage too for homeowners that have been at their property for several years, that maybe purchased 20 years or plus, is Proposition 13, and really is being able to keep your property tax basis. So if you do the like for like home, you will retain your original property tax assessment. So you will not get reappraised for the new design. And then oftentimes we've been asked about, well, if I want to do an ADU, is that going to trigger a reassessment? ADUs are separate. They don't get added as a complete package of a new appraisal. Only the improvement value will get added to your property tax basis.
I think that was all really great points. Thanks for adding that, Jonathan, and thank you, Josh. All right, next slide, Matt. All right, so if you'd like to take this one, Jonathan, when you're considering ordinances and law, because you said it a little earlier.
Yeah, so I mentioned that some of the extra coverages for your under your insurance policy. The big one that has been in discussion with us and several clients and people in the community is, what is ordinance and law? So this component of your policy really covers any current building codes that your property will require coming up to conforming to today's standards. And this really covers a lot of items that you probably or may not have had before. One is fire sprinklers on the interior. The second would be is all the different Title 24 upgrades related to the windows, the water heater, the HVAC systems, etc. We have the solar, different kind of seismic bracing for earthquake retrofitting, etc. And this policy coverage across ones that we've seen can range anywhere from 5 to 25% of that dwelling A. And now this coverage is an incurred expense, which means that you will not get reimbursed from your insurance carrier until you provide them a paid receipt. So you will have that coverage. However, they will not release it to you until you actually incur that expense and you pay for it. So we're suggesting that even on your planning and conceptual design and permit fees, etc., and really that process to start building, that you start collecting those receipts and submit them to your insurance coverage for reimbursement through this policy.
Perfect. I really appreciate that. Next slide. Value engineering, one of Jonathan Gallagher's favorite things to talk about. So Jonathan, share this one because this is kind of hard. It was hard for me to understand it in the beginning. I think when we were talking about putting this presentation together, you had some really fantastic examples.
Sweet. So value engineering, great term. Thank you for the accolades. And really what it means is you're really making strategic selections to maintain the highest amount, the highest quality while minimizing your cost of construction. So, the most common question that we're being asked is, well, what does it cost to build and what's your price per square foot? Well, obviously, it depends on what your interior finishes are going to look like. If you want a golden toilet, your price per square foot is going to be significantly higher. So we're going to be looking at when we are building a house, and obviously recommending for you as well is look at things that you can do inside your house from a finish level where you can reduce costs but still maintain a really elegant and classy look. So one of our picture here is baseboards, for example. A 4-inch baseboard versus a 6-inch baseboard. It's a small amount of material different. You may not even really notice it when you're living in the space, but this cost alone is additional. David and I calculated, I think it was another 25 to 30% more, and in a 1,500 square foot house, that could be $1,000 that you're saving
Exactly.
And so we take this example and we're really looking at it across your whole home in terms of, whether it's the flooring material, whether it's out, exterior tiles and finish and so forth. And so uh, really looking for ways to save money without cutting corners.
Right, because this is something that I really appreciated that when we were talking about it, because there's so many line items to consider. There's, I think, over 150 choices that kind of go into the design process of what someone's going to have to do to get that home, kind of, completed. And so if you start looking at the value engineering, prospect and perspective, that Jonathan is talking about, that $1,000 could really kind of add up really quickly when you're looking at the home as a total job. So thank you for, spending some time to explain that to us. Really appreciate that. Next slide. Design and architecture. Okay, so let's dive into this one really quick. Designers and architects is a big one. Next slide, Matt, please. So you're hearing a lot of things that are out there, when people are saying, hey, I'm working with an architect, I'm working with a designer. Sometimes the titles are kind of getting kind of confused or used interchangeably. But we want to kind of talk about an architect is a licensed professional with a degree in architecture. They have to pass a lot of tests, and they are registered with the state of California. One of the biggest difference between architect and designer is that architects can stamp plans. Any set of plans that are being submitted to county, you're going to have a stamp. If you're working with a designer, and there are a lot of wonderful designers that have been doing it for decades, and they are just as talented and skilled to design a home as an architect, if not better. But it's taking the time to really understand the difference. Designers are going to have to bring in structural engineers or electrical engineers to make sure that they get those stamps that the county is going to ask for. Architects have the ability to do that themselves. They're also trained to be able to do very complex designs, whether they're multi-story or very elaborate. Architects are definitely worth what they're charging, and they're fantastic. Designers also spend a little bit more time kind of getting an idea of what their projects have been and where they're working. And I think that's a really great way and a great option for people who are, trying to rebuild and save a little bit of cost. You can go the design route, but it is really up to you and your own personal preferences. Gentlemen, anything to add on this slide?
Yeah, I think on the design side, David, I say more frequently, probably in this case here in Altadena, people will go towards the designer route, but it's important to understand is what the additional costs are going to be outside of just your first conceptual design. So that's the first phase. And then you got to collect all those stamps, as you mentioned. So really getting an understanding of when you're working with someone is what are those additional costs going to be? What's it going to cost to get that full set of plans stamped so that you actually have a full set that you're ready to issue permits with?
Could you give me an example of that? Because I think you're really touching on a good point.
So you're going to need an electrical engineer to sign off on the electrical detail as well as all the different Title 24. You're going to need a structural engineer to sign off on the concrete, the foundation elements as well as, the framing layout, the beams and all the different load calcs that are required to build a home. So a designer, most likely, they'd either refer you to someone, and give you a couple different options, or, they may have a partnership or someone that they work with frequently that they trust that they would then send their design to stamp them.
I
Uh,
think that, yeah, and that's perfect. So the one thing that is important, like just what Jonathan is saying, as that designer, the designer is going to give you an idea cost of, let's say it's going to be X number of dollars to design that home. But then, just like Jonathan said, you're going to have that plan sent out for those various levels, and those are all additional costs. So when you kind of weigh all those different costs with the designer fee and all the structural and the electrical and everything else that's required, you want to kind of see how it lines up with an architect, just to kind of have a good idea for it. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I would just point out that, I think you mentioned this, but it's important to emphasize that you're going to have architectural plans stamped to submit to the city. So if you go the design route, and here at BZ Build, we do both. We have designers and architects and engineers and Title 24. It's all in-house for us. And there's a lot of go between, but you really want that process to be smooth from designer to architect to structural engineer to Title 24 compliance to make sure, there's going to be hiccups along the way from the county, but you want to make sure you're ready for those hiccups and that you can address them and keep your project moving forward.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Josh. That was a great insight. Next slide, please. County timelines. So let's, Jonathan, if you want to jump on county timelines.
Yeah, we'll do. So the first, obviously most important phase that David was just mentioning about is the design. This design element includes these three details, which is the floor plan, the site plan, and the elevation. Now, this is really, it's the concept. This is the part of your project where you're submitting to your plan check, you're paying that fee. In this case, for the homes, it's I think it's roughly $1,400 for the county of LA. And they're going to look at your project and they're going to look at your site and they're going to say, you know what? Per this project, we approve it or we deny it based off of design guidelines and setback requirements, etc. This process is typically taking anywhere, from 3 to 4 weeks right now.
And Josh, can you add some insight to this? Because I know you're very familiar and you work with a lot of clients that are with this phase specifically.
Yeah, and here at BZ Build, we call it BZ Build Co. We call it phase one. In your phase one, this is what you get. You'll get a floor plan, and as you can see here, the floor plan is the interior of your house. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Where does the garage go? Are there stairs? Where does the dining room go? Where's your stove? Where's your fridge? You want all that. You want to nail that stuff down. It doesn't mean that that's permanent, but it's really hard to move in exterior walls the further along you go, especially in construction. So you want to get a good concept for your floor plan and be happy with it here, because this is the easiest time to revise anything. The site plan is where everything that sits on your property, where exactly does it sit? This is based off of the survey. It'll have your setbacks. Altadena is usually 20 feet from the sidewalk in the front of your house, 5 feet from the side. Can you have an ADU? Where does it, if you're building an ADU, you can put it in the front of your house as long as it's 20 feet from the sidewalk, and then you can put your house in the back. Where's your pool go? Do you want a tool shed, a workshop, anything else? Anything that's going to be on the site will be seen on the site plan. And then the elevations this is what you see when you pull into your driveway. This is what your house looks like. Is it a mid-century modern? Is it a modern farmhouse? Traditional? Spanish? Whatever you can imagine or whatever you want, you will get to see what it looks like with the windows and doors. And again, this is submitted to plan check at the city for them to give us and you the okay to move forward. At this point, you can still make changes. You're not committed to these exact windows or these exact doors, but the sizing and information is pretty good. And then from there, you'll make your purchase choices, and that's where the value engineering comes in.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. All right, next slide. All right, so Jonathan, you want to jump on into this one? This is where you have a complete plan set, and they're talking about where the LA County is going and why they take the time that they do.
Yeah, so I also want to mention one more thing.
Please.
Josh on the last slide said when you go through your floor plan, it's not set in stone. So when you move from the design phase and you pass plan check and you get into this stage where you're doing your complete plan set, this is where you're doing all the detailed framing and your full layout and such. So if there are modifications that you wanted to do, this would be the time to do them and really understand all the different spacing. But the purpose of this slide here is to really talk to you about all the different departments that you're going to have to go through to get your full plan set approved. And some of them are pretty tedious and I would say can be problematic. Public works can often give you problems, and it's really important to make sure that you have a professional that you work with that's understanding of these departments and what the requirements are going to be. Working with the county fire department can also be very tedious. But we've got a whole list of them here. Sanitation is another one. And really just understanding the process of why does it take 3 to 4 months to review your plans is because you've got to go through all these different layers. They all have to see your plans. Some of them require additional detail on your plans, and so they all have to pass and stamp your set in order to go back to building and safety to get the final stamp in order to go back to plan check for your final approval so that you can actually get your permits and start building.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And I got to tell you, folks, we could spend 30 minutes to an hour just on this one slide of why it takes 3 to 4 months. And this is expedited. This is faster than typically, a new home construction would take, which is, multiple times longer than that. So thank you for that explanation. Really appreciate it. Next slide. All right, bid requests. So this is, I think, something that I think is important to do, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Matt. So the one thing that Josh was talking about just a little while ago on that conceptual plan where you had those three images of that house, and that's a conceptual. That is it's a little bit, it's not as detailed as what Jonathan was talking about, what you need to submit for your full plan approval. So a conceptual, in most instances, you're going to be able to have that idea of the size, the square footage, where it's going to sit on the property. And you're going to be able to get a price for most general contractors with just a conceptual plan. Some may want a full plan set, which is very detailed and is just completed. But for example, there are the general contractors will give you kind of a rough idea of what that price is. A full plan set is just what Jonathan was talking about. It's gone through all of the agencies and it's ready for, submittal, and it's going to be ready for issuance. It's been approved. That has all of the window schedules, door schedules. It talks about every part of anything that's mechanical that's going to be in that build of your home is there. And then that's where they're going to be able to give you a really, really accurate price of what it's going to cost to rebuild your home. So it's also very important, and I want to stress this, that if you're looking at different bids from different contractors, to be able to line them up so that you can understand exactly what their cost line items are, and so you can understand the difference between one and the other. You can look at a price per square foot, but how does it compare to the others? I mean, have they included all the things that the other contractor does include? And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Next slide, please.
I want to add one more thing there, David.
Please.
So when you are going through these clearances and really building out that full plan set to get your approval, there's a few things that they're going to add on there. One is going to be the fire sprinklers. That's the plan of where the fire sprinklers are going to be located, and the fire department is going to be the one who determines that. Same with the solar. The solar, understanding the wattage, how many solar panels you need, that is dictated in the building and safety plan check, part of the process. So therefore, when you're going to contractors and you're getting bids, they may put a hold for a specific budget for solar or for fire sprinklers, but until they actually have that detailed plan, they really are just estimating. And so I think I can speak from experience here, and I'm sure David too can, but there's been times where I had worked with contractors years ago where they gave me a budget item for a HVAC system, and the Title 24 called for a different system once I got the plans approved. And so that price increased. And so oftentimes, if you're working with someone, you need to make sure that your bid is very detailed and it's derived from the details that are on the plans.
Right. And I think you bring up a really good point, Jonathan, is that, that plans as you submit may change, right?
Correct.
And then you have to update that bid. And sometimes that general contractor, that architect, the engineers may not make that sort of calculation when they submitted it. Maybe a code changed or it was updated. Particularly when it comes to Title 24, those things are, again, which is what you're touching on, particularly with solar, is we need to kind of keep those in mind. So when you have your plans done, you're able to kind of see, okay, has anything changed and how has it affected my bid? And so anyway, to that, this is, I think, something where when you're comparing contractor bids one to the other, you want to ask yourself, what is included? And there's a whole list there that we're going to be covering, I think, in the future seminar or webinar. But we also wanted to call out on this one specifically what's typically not included. So if you're getting a bid to build your home, like Jonathan was saying, solar is going to be required and other things that affect, the home, they may not include that in a line item. So when you're looking at bids, is solar included or not? And that's a big line item. I mean, that could be tens of thousands of dollars depending on the size of your home. Also, when you're looking at hardscape driveways and walkways, are they including what LA County has as a minimum, or is it what you want to complete your design? So you really have to spend some time paying attention to it, which is what, we really want you to kind of take away from this. Make sure you're comparing them. And so with our company, BZ Build Co., we usually include about 90% of all the things that are listed above on this slide. But we're going to be very transparent of anything that is not. One thing that's typically not included are appliances. So those are things that you're going to have to go out and consider what you're going to be buying because as if you've been shopping recently, and a lot of people have, there are some big swings and differences between for ovens and refrigerators and washer and dryers. So it's just something to be very mindful, to be conscious of. Gentlemen, anything else to add on this?
Yeah, just to kind of talk a little bit more about the hardscape driveways. So that's part of your plan that's falls within the public works for many homeowners that actually have a public driveway. And so on your plan, if you had to do a new driveway apron, or if you had your garage existing was on the left-hand side of your property, now it's going to be on the right-hand side, and so there's significant hardscape aprons or walkways or driveways that you're gonna have to do in the future, you need to make sure that when you're looking at your construction bid, a contractor typically is not going to put the driveway apron on that bid. Typically, that's a separate project, maybe a different contractor, someone who's licensed to do that specific concrete. So just really making sure that you're understanding of all aspects of your construction, because something as simple as the driveway is required to get your certificate of occupancy. And so, in terms of the full total calculation of this cost per square foot is that may not be included in that price. So, that's my
Thank
additional.
you. No, I thought that was a great. I love the driveway apron kind of call out because that is can be very involved, costs a lot of money, and you have to be the right type of licensed contractor to do that.
And that's something you can get to the end of your project. You can finish the structure. It's beautiful. You get your final permit for the interior for all finish, but then you don't get the certificate of occupancy because you don't have your driveway. And that could hold up a project. So, and
Yeah.
that's an improvement item that can cost upwards of 10, if not maybe more, $20,000.
Yeah. No, it is good. All right, thank you for that. Next slide. Deposits and payments. So let's talk about deposits and payments. Let's go next slide. So this is something where when you've looked at the bids, you've kind of compared everything, side by side, and you're ready to get into a contract with that general contractor. So when you do that and you have everything, it's basically they're going to give you everything of what it costs. All that they're going to ask for, required by California state law, is $1,000, and that's going to be on signing. So, and then as work is completed, Jonathan, why don't you talk to us about that?
So, the construction process obviously is very lengthy, and as far as the progress payment schedule, they're identified by individual construction milestones. And so we call this is a schedule of values. But really these milestones are going to be dictated by typically is your foundation, your framing, when all of your roughs are done for your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, when your roof is put on, when the walls are enclosed. And so just getting an understanding of your contract, when the payments are due, and then making sure in the case of the insurance companies here, is making sure they're communicating with the intermediary to be able to release those funds.
I think it's also important as Jonathan was talking about these various milestones. These milestones should be called out on your contract. Everything, as they say, as it's going to be completed, there should be a line item with how much that is and when it's due. So there should not be any surprises. And typically, and Jonathan called it out with your insurance company, they're going to be waiting for those, and that's how they're going to be expecting them to be presented to them, and it's required, then you should require it to be presented to you in the same way. That sound right?
Perfect.
Excellent. All right, next slide. Oh, right. Construction timelines. So this is a fun one. So let's go to the next slide after construction timelines because we want to know how long it's going to take to build. So this is something where we're trying to get a really good sense. You've got your permits. Everything is ready to go. You've signed your contract, you've given the $1,000, and you're okay, let's build my home. How long does that take? Now, this is now in this moment of time, and this is some debate on this. We're getting the feedback, and what we're looking at from our jobs is going to be about 10 to 12 months, but I really want to have our team weigh in on this too.
Yeah, so I'll start after you, David. So look, construction is a journey. It takes a long time. If we want to walk through the different phases of construction, you might have a couple months to get the foundation done. Once the foundation is done, you're gonna start framing. You got the framers. If you have a general contractor who has a really great framing crew who works hard and they have a good, solid, manly team, significant team, or a large crew, so to speak, they can knock out a framing of a house in probably a month or so. I mean, if you've seen construction workers frame a house, good ones, it's phenomenal how quickly they can they can build. And then you get into your mechanical, electrical, plumbing. That could take several months. But typically, we're looking at a 12-month horizon from start to finish of when we can foresee yourself actually moving into this house.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. All right, let's kind of go on because I know there was a question in the Q&A that I want to get to. But one of the things that are very happy about and proud to offer the community as a company with BZ Build Co. is the process of doing all of these things. Again, this information is just for anybody to use, but if you are looking for somebody to talk to about rebuilding your home, we're very proud of our simple three-phase curated process where we design your home. We're going to do the conceptual that we showed you. We're going to get everything ready to submit for the plans and permits that we've talked about. And we're also going to be able to do the construction. Our hope, our kind of goal is to help everybody rebuild the home that they want, whether it's going to be a like for like, or if it's going to be something much more unique and much more elaborate. The idea is we're just doing one of one. We're doing custom designs. And so I think that that's really important that we want to kind of call that out as what we're all going to be able to feature. Anything else to add, Jonathan?
I mean, I think you nailed it. It's a one of one home. Is we want to build your home. So it's your home the way that you've designed it, the way that you've envisioned it, and really the way that you've imagined, living in your new property. And part of the process working with our design team, and I'd like Josh to kind of chime in here, is there's no one that knows their property better than the people that have been living there. So they get to really illustrate all those details, and pieces and places on the lot where they loved, and really take that design element to create and really construct something that they're proud of.
Yeah, I think that's one of the parts of my job that I love is finding out what people really miss about their house, and how can we bring that back? How can we improve upon that? Is it possible to improve upon it? It's not just how wide are your hallways, or are your closets bigger, but maybe it's the view from your master bedroom or the view from your living room. Altadena has amazing views in a lot of different directions, great sunsets and foothills, and um, that's what makes this pleasurable, is to find those things that are unique to your house and bring them to life.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. And the next slide, please, Matt. Is We do want to help everybody rebuild beautiful Altadena. We love the community, like Josh just said. There's views everywhere. We think it's a magical place, and we want to be part of it. This is also in the presentation where we really want to kind of dive into any kind of Q&A questions that people have submitted. And one of them, this might be a little bit, I haven't seen this one before, is from Cara. And her question is, we've been told that we can't start construction until our immediate neighbors their lots have been cleared. Now, I haven't heard that yet. Have either of you heard that, let's say like that one slide that we showed where one lot was cleared and the other one wasn't? Is that preventing that cleared lot from being able to start their construction?
I personally have not heard that. Um, I haven't seen that before. That would be something that we would run to Xavier with on our team, who could give us strong consulting advice from the county. But my understanding is I don't believe that a neighbor's property conditions would affect yours unless there was some sort of significant encroachment, um, or there was some safety hazard or some sort of significant, sloping or, you know, like a
Right.
wall that would
Right.
make
I would. So in this example, Carl, I don't think that there's anything that on the neighbor's property that would stop the construction. Now there's still quite a bit of time that's going to happen before, let's say, this person had their permits issued, excuse me, and then they'd be able to build. But if they did have their permits in hand and they were ready to go, it's a good question because the Army Corps or the private contractor is going to be removing the cars and all the debris, and I think it's something we really want to kind of dive into a lot more in a lot more detail. So I think that we will be able to post this answer. Hopefully, Matt, you can help me. We can try to get this answer to her. To figure out how we can do it. I think it's an important one to be able to cover. And also, and thank you for that question. It was really, really good one. So,
David, I got one more thing to add to that too, Carl. I think really with regard to neighbors, neighboring properties, even this one that we're looking at here on the slide is how we started the presentation is really securing your property. And so putting up a temporary fencing around your property boundaries would prevent someone from overstepping and coming into your property. And if the cleanup for said property, like we're looking over here, if they needed access, then I would presume that they would reach out to you directly to get access onto your property, and you would have to grant them permission to.
so she's also saying that the Army Corps that's what they said. So if that's the case, that may be the condition. I think that to refer back to what they may have said and you can't do it, but my understanding is that all of the lots are going to be cleared in short order. It depends on if your neighbor has signed the the letter and the authorization that they have to allow the Army Corps to come on. Because if they haven't, then in very short order, I think in June, July, they're going to get notices that their properties are nuisances or hazards. So if it hasn't been cleared, the county is going to say you have to clear it, and there's going to be some notices from them. So that and I would imagine that you're not going to be able to delay that. So
And
again,
so if I may interject, Kara, I do have a little information on that. The county has stated that private property owners who opted out of the Army Corps debris removal program or didn't even opt in the first place, they've got to hire an approved specialized contractor to complete the work. But there's a deadline. June 1st is the fire debris removal permit deadline. They have to have hired a licensed contractor by June 1st. And if they don't have that permit by June 1st, the property will be declared a public nuisance. And then the deadline for complete debris removal, fire debris has to be removed according to the county by June 30th. And if they fail to meet the above deadlines, the county will take steps to remove fire ash and debris from the property, and then they'll charge the cost of that removal to the property owner, either as a bill, or the cost will be recovered through a lien on the property. So, if your neighbor is not in the process of getting it cleared right now, you may want to remind them they need to look into that very, very soon.
thank you, Matt. I think that's really kind of spells it out. So hopefully that answers the question. If it doesn't, we're not going anywhere. We're here to help too as a resource. We're also paying attention to what Supervisor Catherine Barger is doing in her weekly, or as she was doing weekly updates, and that could be something that if she still does to ask that question of her. And again, always reach out to us. We're happy to be a resource. Matt, thank you for that explanation. Really appreciate that. Is there anything else that we have that we want to address before we close this up? Because we're getting close to 60 minutes.
We do. We have four more quick questions that were submitted by people who registered. One was, and maybe Josh, you can speak to this. What does like for like mean?
So again, like for like means traditionally like for like means you mean building the exact same structure again. In this instance, they're allowing 10% or 200 square feet in addition to your original structure. And the caveat with that is the bulk and mass. You can't just have 20-foot ceilings and go up. But it does give you the advantage of maintaining your original setbacks One of the biggest issues that actually people are facing is they want to put their garage in the front of their house. Some people already have the garage in the front of their house. So if they do a like for like, they can keep the garage in the front of the house. If you don't, and you're zone one, low residential, you have to put your garage in the back 50% of, I believe it's the back 50% of your property behind your house. So that's what like for like is. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
And then we had another question someone had submitted asking, where can I put an EDU on my property?
Oh, I want to take that one. So, so ADUs typically go just about in the back. They're usually detached or attached. Depending on how big of a house you're going to be rebuilding, you can actually have that within. You call it a junior ADU. It has to have some specific requirements if it's going to be under the roof line of the primary house to be a junior. So that's usually pretty simple to kind of define, but it typically is going to go in the back. Now, the codes in the state of California say that you do not have the room to build an 800 square foot ADU in the back of the property. You can build it in the front.
And
Nice.
that interestingly leads us into another question that was submitted, which is,
Oh, I think Jonathan wants to
Hey,
jump in on that answer
yeah,
too.
go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Matt.
I was waiting for David because I know he's the ADU specialist to disclose that we could put the ADU in the front of the lot. The other thing is regard to the setback requirements. There's a little bit more leniency in the setback requirements when you're doing an ADU. As well as we've had some clients that we've worked with that actually had existing duplexes, and if you have a duplex, you can actually build two ADUs. So um, you can get creative in this process, and yeah, ADUs are fun. We're here to help.
Yeah, no, and you touched on something because I don't want to dive into other codes and things that exist within the state laws and what you're allowed to do. We'll leave that for another
Yeah.
topic because that could be kind of controversial. But you're absolutely 100% right. If you have a duplex you want to replace it, you can add an additional two. So thank you for that.
And then the last question that someone had submitted was, what is kind of the average cost on price per square foot right now for construction?
Oh, that's a tough one. We're seeing anything from 400 and I say maybe 450 to 550 with 500, kind of being right in the middle. Uh, and this is basically for all the construction. A really important and really complex question, hard to answer in a short amount of time. But it's everything from the construction to all the requirements that, the county is going to have you do. Like Jonathan and Josh have mentioned, if you have to have solar, if you have to have upgraded, appliances to meet the energy efficiency codes, there's a lot of additional things that go beyond just the construction. That's why I mentioned a moment ago, it's very, very critical to be able to compare bids from contractors and then ask that question of what's not included to be able to get your final and to be really done. So that I just wanted to answer that as briefly and as succinctly as I could. But Jonathan, I'd like him to kind of put in his thoughts too.
Yeah, so the price per square foot is obviously it's a hard question to answer because there's so many nuances and intricacies that make up that number. Really, the first two buckets that you're looking at is you got your hard cost of construction, which is the actual building of the structure itself, and then you have the soft costs. And the soft costs are all of the required permits, plan check fees, licensed professionals that you're going to have to hire to actually get into the building phase. So whether or not you're including that price into your total, cost per square foot, that could obviously create some variability in that number. But then also, we talked earlier about the value engineering. So when you're building a house, depending on how you want to do your tile work in your bathroom, if you want to do some really intricate detail, elaborate, herringbone small tiles, that can exponentially, increase your cost on the labor side. So there's a lot of details in the home building process, in the finish process, that can drastically change that number.
Thank you. I think that's a fantastic explanation. And if anybody has anything else to add, just let me know. But I want to kind of turn it over to Matt to kind of wrap this thing up.